everybody. Thanks for popping into the Successful Mind podcast, where today David and I are discussing the need to be needed and how sneaky it can be. We even include a couple of questions at the very end of the podcast to help you self-identify if this could be one of your hidden issues. So make sure you listen all the way through. Thanks so much.
You're listening to the Successful Mind podcast.
Successful people learn how to make their minds work for them.
We are Life is Now, and this is the Successful Mind podcast. Okay, David, so over the last couple of months, we've done several podcasts, one on the need to be liked and how that can bring your business to its knees, and one on the need to be in control and how that can bring your business to its knees. But I think there's another need that I want to address because we see this come up with our clients, and that is the need to be needed.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's interesting about this is that it could come from a positive. It could have a positive twist. Like people could use this in a positive way to turn it into, how can I help this person, right? But very often they will turn it into problem creating.
Yeah, or excuse creating.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So these underlying hidden needs, like liked, the need to be right, the need to be in control, the need not to be wrong, I think they all have somewhat of a bit of control attached to them. And they're definitely patterns from childhood that people set up, that they found ways to get their needs met throughout their childhood. But what they don't realize is that they're not dealing with the authority of their parents any longer. They are their authority. So what's fascinating about the need to be needed is really the only person that can fulfill that spot inside yourself is yourself. Somebody else can't really do it. And if you think about it, like if I have to be needed by somebody else all the time to feel good about myself, then I'm pretty much at the whim of whatever else is going on. Yeah. And I'm not really calling the shots for myself. I know somebody intimately in my family that suffers from this really in a bad way. And this person, unless you are reaching out to them and saying, hey, I've got a problem, can you help me with this problem? They have no way of being intimate with you. They have no way of being vulnerable with you, transparent with you. They don't know how to have a relationship with anybody unless they are being needed. And all of the needs are completely dysfunctional, because if it is needed outside of what their zone of expertise is, which isn't much to begin with, there's nothing that they can do, and they actually have a backlash at that. And most of the need is if a person is in some kind of serious trouble that they're getting into. It's never really something for the positive.
So let's take this back to hypothetical and how this pattern gets set up. Okay. So you're a child, and children take on roles in their families to get their needs met. Yes.
Yes.
We've talked about roles. We've talked about, there are kids in the family that take the rebel role, the savior role, the A student role, or the good kid role, the bad kid role,
the bad kid, the rebellion.
There's 500 some plus different roles that kids take on when they're young. And if you really sit and think about your family dynamic, it should probably hit you pretty quick what role you took when you were a child, right? Like it's not hidden from you in any way, shape, or form. But the need to be needed, hypothetically, let's just say you've got a young child, and there's a kind of a role reversal where this child is actually more of a parent than the parent is.
Mm-hmm.
So they get their value from needing to be needed. Yes?
Yes.
That's one way that this is set up. But there are other ways that this is set up?
There's another one. In many cases, it keeps a person safe.
Well, explain that.
Well, so the idea is that if they're not needed, they feel extremely vulnerable. They don't know what their place is. They don't know what their position is. They don't know how to interact with anybody else, and it scares them. It's a frightening thing for a kid because they're not only are they not getting their needs met, they don't know what to do in order to feel secure within this environment. And usually when people develop these needs as children, they're coming from, so they're looking for vulnerable, inconsistent environments, right? So maybe the parents are alcoholics, or they're abusive, or they lack the ability to accept responsibility, or they're not home a lot, and this kid doesn't know how to take care of themselves. So they interject themselves in a place where, let me see if I can help and do this. Let me see if I can help and do that. And then if they can get somebody to respond to that, they actually feel, well, it also gives them a sense of importance, right? Like, I feel good because now I have found this place where I can add value to this. But it's usually done in a way where it's almost a con in a lot of ways, because somebody else will play the role of, like, the victim, so to speak. They don't actually need anything, but they're playing this role in order to interact with you on the, from the essence of that here is a way for you to be needed, and a way that you could actually do things for me.
Well, we saw this with one of our private clients. He grew up in a pretty tumultuous childhood. Mom was a single parent, and he took on the role of raising his younger siblings.
Yeah.
Like, and his value was attached to the fact that he was the one that was making everyone dinner and taking care of things. And he was the problem solver. He was the person to make sure the ship didn't get sunk and the boat didn't get tipped, right? So he had a really strong need to be needed. Translate that to, 30 years later, and he's CEO of a growing business. If you have a need to be needed, you don't want to let go of control.
Right.
Because then you're not needed anymore. And your value is tied up in that. So this need to be needed is sneaky, because it's a little bit different than the need to always be in control. But it's not that different than the need to always be in control, yes?
Yes. And this person, as we well know, might go around creating problems.
Yes.
Just to be needed. The futuristic vision thinking that a business requires, it presents an interesting scenario for these individuals, because that means that you create a vulnerability for yourself because you don't know how to solve the problem. You have to step into the vision and learn how to solve a new problem, right? When you create a vision for yourself, we're going to expand the company. We have a goal. We have a big agenda 3 to 5 years out. We don't know how we're going to solve those problems. Mm-hmm. These are things that we have never dealt with before. But when you get a person who has a need to be needed, usually they're solving problems that they already know how to solve. So they have to. So in a business, if the business is growing, that means that they very often will stagnate the business in order to keep creating problems, so that they get themselves validated in that place over and over again.
And we see this a lot, right?
We see this a
lot and it shows up in that way. It also shows up in them not providing autonomy to their leaders, right? Where they'll delegate something to a leader, ask them to carry it out. The leader owns that responsibility and that outcome. And then they get antsy because they're feeling like, I don't know. And then they jump in and blow everything up.
Yeah. Yes.
Because they have that strong need to be needed, and their value is tied to their need to be needed.
Well, we even had a client one time tell us about how they would blow their business up. Remember that?
Yeah. Why don't you talk about that?
So, and I say this with good intentions, because this person has actually built an amazing business. And I think they probably got out of this scenario, but for a long period of time, as they would get to this place where they would make amazing progress, they would tear the whole damn thing down by just destroying everything that everybody did, and everybody would have to kind of start over again. And this was a way, so nobody knew what to do, right? Because this person created so much chaos, and then he became the pillar of the person that was needed the most over and over, because I don't think he knew how to be needed forward looking in the business. I mean, he eventually did hire some really great people to help him accomplish that. But in the midterm of that, it was like he would get to this place and then he would just tear everything down, or creating constant chaos in a way where people, I think, get frustrated. They don't know how to solve the problem because you keep changing the rules or the direction or the goal, or you making people constantly wrong so that they always have to rely on you for the answer. And, I mean, that's just total chaos.
Yeah, it's kind of like, we always talk about in terms of leadership. If you're the leader of your company and you have to be the smartest person in the room, you're not a leader.
That's right.
Like, the idea as a leader is that you attract people who are smarter than you, who can do a better job in their respective expertise than you can.
That's exactly correct.
And if you have a need to be needed, you have to be the smartest person in the room. You're never going to grow a team. And the downside of that is your team's not going to stick around.
No.
That's the difference between you hiring an employee and you hiring a team member, right?
Exactly.
An employee shows up, checks the box, does their quote unquote task, doesn't really care about what the big vision is of the company, just is there to complete a task. A team member is someone that is willing to go above and beyond, is bought into the vision, is looking for areas looking for areas of growth, looking for ways that they can help the company move forward, cares about the vision, and is bought into the vision. They're two totally different things. And if you've got a need to be needed, you'll attract employees.
Yeah.
Because those employees are constantly going to look to you to solve all their problems because they're employees.
Right.
They're just there to complete a task. A team member is there because they want to own the outcome and they want to solve the problems. If you're constantly stepping in, creating chaos and solving problems for them, it disempowers them and they'll go find someone else to work with.
And don't you think, so you talk really good about this difference between the A and the B players. I was doing a podcast for a construction podcast a week or so ago. And the guy was telling me that he had never heard this concept of the A player wanting to be empowered to solve problems. And I said, well, you don't have any A players on your team then, right? You have people that are kind of have this victim mindset. And I was actually teaching him how to sell. We were going through the questions. And he was just floored by how powerful those questions were and what it ultimately meant for the growth of the people that he works with. And the whole idea was, I told him, I said, if you empower these people to actually solve the problem, where you don't have to be the one that solves the problem, they'll want to do that, right? They're literally going to want to bring their expertise to the table and
if they're an A player, they will.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're saying. It's the A players that'll leave, right? The B players more.
Oh yeah, B and C players will stay. A players will leave, 100%.
Because there's a mode of responsibility to this. Yes.
Yeah, A players are constantly looking for growth, and if they don't feel like there's opportunities for growth, they leave. And if you're the one that has to constantly solve the problem and you're disempowering them, they don't see the ability for them to grow in that scenario, and so they leave. It's a really big problem. A players are always looking for what they can do more, how they can be better, how they can be part of the solution. But if you don't give them the opportunity to be part of the solution, they'll leave.
Yep.
And A players like to work for A player leaders. So if you're someone that says you're going to do something and then you don't do it, if you're someone that shows up to meetings late, if you're someone that's asking someone to do something that you're not willing to do, A players aren't going to stick around there either.
Right.
They want to work with other A players.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such an interesting philosophy.
All right.
Are you an established business owner sick and tired of scratching and clawing your way to the next level of success? Believe me, we've all been there. And we at Life Is Now want you to know that you're closer than you realize to achieving the quantum leap that you've been working so hard to get. This is why we asked some of the industry's best and brightest leaders to join us in our upcoming Business Momentum Summit. During these 2 days together, we'll share strategies and tools that are working right now to create massive success in your business. This free and fully virtual training event will take place on April 27th and 28th, where we'll be joined by top business growth experts such as Lisa Nichols, Angela Loria, Nick Kuzmich, and others. Each speaker plans to share the strategies and secrets that led to their business success. Some topics you can expect over the course of these value-packed 2 days are cultivating a winning mindset, how to use money to make more money, how to harness AI to reclaim your time and serve your clients at a higher level, how to use books to establish your platform, how to use LinkedIn to generate high-paying clients, Facebook ad secrets and strategies that save you money, how to create live events that catapult your business, and many more. For more information on how you can participate in this life-changing Business Momentum Summit, go to lifeisnowinc.com/momentum. That's lifeisnowinc.com/momentum. The Business Momentum Summit is about more than just making a few extra bucks. It's about pushing yourself to the next level and beyond. The speakers we've assembled will give you the strategies you need to make that happen. With the right mindset and the right tools, you too can achieve financial success and personal fulfillment. It's time to turn your 6-figure year into 6-figure months with the Business Momentum Summit. Go to lifeisnowinc.com/momentum and take full advantage of this amazing opportunity. And now, back to the show. The one person that I was talking about in my family, one of the interesting things from a family perspective on this is that they will not show up and be supportive in anything that doesn't allow them to contribute from the place of being needed.
So, wow.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Exactly. Wow. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is actually an issue that's going on. This is in my extended family. And somebody had contacted me over the last few weeks and asked me how they should handle this because they wanted to have a close relationship with this person, but they're not familiar with anything that we're talking about. And I was trying to explain to them that this person's value in life was really about being needed, but it's such a low level. It didn't allow them to communicate or have fun or contribute on anything that was actually productive. There had to constantly be a damn crisis going on in order for this person to feel good about themselves. So that if that was not the case, they're not even showing up for anything, a party, a wedding, nothing.
If they're not needed, they're not there.
If they're not needed, they're not there. Yeah.
So they just constantly go around looking to plug into someone who needs help.
Yes. If you're doing very well, they can't acknowledge that.
They can't even be around you in the same space.
At all.
Wow.
At all. It's that extreme.
That's gotta be that's sad.
Yeah. Well,
that's so sad for them.
It is. And this is one of the typical things where this is a person that came from they were a child of an alcoholic, but they didn't become an alcoholic themselves. So they're kind of like a dry alcoholic, right? They have the symptoms and the behaviors of what it's like to be in an abusive alcoholic family, but they were so repulsed by the drinking that they didn't go down that road. But they never healed the emotional equivalent of it for themselves. And that's what it's turned out to be for them.
So they only know how to be in a codependent relationship.
Extremely codependent.
Yeah.
They have no close relationships with their kids, right? They have, for the most part, this person has magnificent kids. They can't. He doesn't know how to be close with them because they don't have terrible problems for him to solve, and he is either jealous or off-put by any of the success that they actually do have. He can't even be like congratulatory in that situation. So that's a family thing, and you're talking about it in a business thing, and it's an interesting thing because if I have a need to be needed, do you think that I can be happy for someone who's doing an amazing job as an A player?
No, absolutely not. You don't want to be around an A player because they're the one that's getting all the attention because they're the one solving the problem.
Right.
And you get validation from solving the problem. So if they're solving the problem and you're not getting the validation that you need to feel like you're an okay person.
So what does that person typically, what have you seen them do from a team perspective in situations like this?
With the need to be needed?
Yeah. Didn't we have an experience with somebody who was a bit abusive?
Yes. So we've seen this show up in many scenarios with the need to be needed before they were consciously aware that they had a need to be. It's interesting because there's a lot of business owners that if you ask them if they were suffering from a need to be needed, they would say, absolutely not. That doesn't sound like me at all. But then when you actually get into the conversation and you ask the right questions and they start hearing themselves answer and you start following patterns, you can't not see it. And that's when awareness comes in. And then with awareness, then comes an opportunity to make a new choice or a new decision. But with a need to be needed, you've got a totally dysfunctional team. Nobody knows where they're going. You've set up an environment where everyone feels like they're walking on eggshells. So you've got the business owner who needs to be the person to solve all the problems. But if there are problems, he gets angry at those problems.
Yeah.
So then you've got employees that are walking on eggshells, trying not to create problems, which in itself creates problems because problems are supposed to happen because it's how you learn. So it sets up a very dysfunctional team environment. There's a complete and total lack of culture. You create a team of yes people. So you're the primary decision maker and everyone else just agrees with you to go along because it doesn't really matter what they say anyway. You're going to do what you're going to do.
Sure.
And you could agree to something and then change your mind halfway down the road because it was too comfortable. So you need to create chaos. So you've got something to solve. You're impatient with your team. And part of that is because you're not communicating properly to your team members. So they're guessing at what your expectations are and what you want from them rather than having, accurate expectations and measures of success with your team. So it's a really toxic environment when you've got a need to be needed. You will literally surround yourself with B and C players who are all dependent on you because that's what makes you feel important.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why I left the company that I worked at before I started my own business. And there was something that perplexed me for a long time, and I actually got the answer to it this weekend. So I worked for a family, and there were five. There was the owner, who was the father, and 5 kids that worked for this family. And I was the only person that had ever been promoted out of the bottom ranks up into management and then go into upper management. And there was something really interesting that happened one day. There was always this contention because it was a union company, but the family never wanted to follow the union. They literally wanted to cause problems for the drivers constantly. So when I got promoted, before I really understood human behavior and what these people were actually doing, I remember one time there was this driver did something, and I was looking for what was the rule in the union handbook, and it was clear as day, this rule, and I pointed it out to the son who was the vice president, and he said to me, "I don't see it that way." He said, "That's just your perception that that's what it says." And I thought to myself, that's the craziest thing I ever heard. That's my perception that is clear as day. So I was watching something the other day on YouTube, and somebody was explaining about how very often people that go to college, whether they're they're going after some legal profession or they're learning how to debate or they're learning critical thinking or whatever, one of the things that they learn to create arguments so that they can win is to kind of bluff somebody over the idea that what you think is fact is just your perception, and my perception's right and your perception's wrong. And I didn't know that this was actually a strategy, a skill set.
Kind of like gaslighting?
Kind of like gaslighting, yeah. But that this was actually taught. And when I heard that, I immediately thought about this argument that I got in with this guy, because I was saying that this meant one thing, and he was reading it, and he had this inflection into it that was completely bogus in my mind. Mm-hmm. But his point of argument was, you're wrong because I have this different perception and I'm the leader. And all they ever did was cause problems so that they could be the ones to actually solve the problem. But they made everybody that worked for them miserable. They gave me this incredible opportunity, at least I thought at the time, to begin to expand the company across the country. And I start to get out like just across the state. And I find out that from a price point, we're not competitive because we're union and everybody outside of Chicago's not union, right? So I said, okay, we need to adjust our prices out there. And they said, absolutely not. We can't adjust the prices out there. This is what we charge. And I said, but we don't have the same costs out here. We don't need to charge the same amount. And they created an obstacle for me that you couldn't overcome. You absolutely could not so they got to be right. They got to win the fight. And they would have had the most amazing expansion in their business had they actually run it like a business and looked at the data. What does the data show that we should charge, instead of creating all of these massive problems and then not being able to expand the company just so that they could be right. And they felt that it also gave them this weird thing. Like they had this idea. I mean, fuel is extremely competitive. So you're basically selling on your ability to deliver the fuel, right? It's all about, it's about the service, not about the price. Okay. And they wanted to insist that their service justified this higher price in a place where they didn't have the cost of labor at the same amount as somebody else did in the country. And then they would stand on that position as if, they were absolutely correct about this. And they were flagrantly wrong. It was just absolutely.
So it was like cutting off their nose to spite their face.
Absolutely. 100% cutting off their nose to spite their face.
And you think that was because of a need to be needed.
Yeah, it was. It was. Everything they did was around that, right? So they would make you wrong constantly. But it was weird though, Steph, because they would say, oh, go do this. We're excited about this. What's your idea? Go do it. And then they would find everything that could possibly be wrong with it. And you had to consistently go to them for any kind of a solution. They would break it down and force you to go to them to solve whatever the problem was.
And what they're doing is creating a dependence on them.
Yes.
And doubt in your mind that you actually could do anything without them.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is a really dysfunctional way to keep people.
Yeah. Well,
psychological breaking down of someone and their ability to make a decision. That's the opposite of leadership. Whereas your job is to actually build leaders, to create autonomy so that they can then build leaders. That's the only way to grow a company.
Yep. It also did this really weird. See, once you were in management, it was different because you weren't stuck in this union mentality where you couldn't go someplace else because of the pay. But the drivers, it really was horrible for them because these guys ended up being stuck in a job that just physically and psychologically beat the hell out of them their whole life. And they had no hope of going anywhere else unless they got retrained to go do something else in life. And they just kept tearing them down, where they literally it was as if they took their self-confidence away that they could do anything that was even constructive.
Well, that's textbook abusive relationship stuff, right?
You're creating a codependency.
Yeah, exactly. Where, slowly over time, someone else breaks down who you are at a core level, and then you don't know who you are anymore without them. Yeah. And so you stay. Right? I mean, that's, wow. I had never heard that story before. I didn't know you worked in that environment. I mean, I've worked in some pretty crummy environments, especially when I was younger. But that's next level.
Yep.
And this need to be needed is, like I said, it's really sneaky. It's if you find that you're the only person in the company that can make a decision, you need to really ask yourself, is this because I have a need to be needed? Is this because I have a need to be the smartest person in the room? Because I need that self-validation, because that's a key point.
Yeah.
Like right now, I'm in the process of completely stepping back from most of the doing in Life Is Now. Liz is running with marketing. Sarah's running with sales. They're all like sharing ideas with me, but they're owning that role. They're making those decisions. I'm counting on them to get more information and be the smartest person so that I'm not making all the decisions. And that's what's supposed to happen. You're supposed to build leaders to be able to do that.
For sure. And They love what they're doing. You could see that they love what they're doing and how they're contributing. You're loving what you're doing. I mean, it's just, it's that seemed one of the, because I've been watching how you've been doing this, and it really seemed like a natural transition for you. You didn't get stuck in this idea like, I've got to just be the everything. You know what I mean?
I'm very comfortable behind the scenes.
Yes, I know. It took years to drag you to be able to do a podcast with me. Like, come on, come do a podcast.
Yeah. So, like I said, if you're listening to this podcast and you're feeling decision fatigue, and you know what I mean by decision fatigue, you go home at the end of the night and you literally can't listen. Like, you can't even listen to your kids talk about their day because you're just so tired and your brain is fatigued by having to make all the decisions. Or if you can tie back all the problems to you stepping in where you shouldn't be stepping in, you really got to assess whether this is an issue for you. And there's no judgment in that. The whole idea is you can't fix what you're not aware of. So the purpose of this podcast is to help you become aware of things so that you can make a conscious choice to do something different.
Right. If you can let, I'm trying to think, how did I first hear this? If you don't have to be the smartest person in the room, and you can give credit to everybody else, there's no limit to what you can accomplish.
None. No. And I think, I've read that in lots of different books, but I think Ray Dalio is a really great example of that.
Yeah, of course.
Like Ray Dalio, in his book, it's called Principles, I think.
Yeah.
Which that is a read. That is definitely a read.
It's like reading Troward in the modern day.
Yeah, but it really is about meritocracy.
Yeah.
Right? The best idea wins, not the person.
Yep.
And that's what you want.
Absolutely.
All right.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the Successful Mind podcast and the Need to Be Needed. This is a lesson that will absolutely change your life. If there are other leaders that you know in business, in networking groups, pass this along. It'll really help them step into their own leadership role and be able to expand the business that they're doing. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening to the Successful Mind podcast. If you like what you've heard and you want to know more, go to lifeisnowinc.com.